Welcome to Feature Please, a hateful voyage to the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
I'm your co-host, Peter.
And here we are, Peter. We are nearly to the end of Season 3. This is their 67th installment. And we have finally reached the episode that inspired what has become a over a year and a half long endeavor.
This is it. This is the big one. This is one before Jerry Ryan.
What did we watch tonight?
We watched Season 3, Episode 25, Worst Case Scenario.
I love this episode so much. Before we talk about anything, after watching it, do you see why, after watching this one, I'm like, we have to do a show about this show?
Here's what I'm curious about. You've referenced that there is the best holodeck episode ever at some point in Voyager's, what would become Voyager's future. Is this what you're calling the best Voyager holodeck episode?
No, there's one better than this.
I refuse to believe it. This pushed so many of my fucking go buttons.
This episode was made for people like us to be able to talk about, and it was just as much fun to watch this for like the sixth time as it was every other time before. I watched it with Stevie, and we had a blast. This is Voyager at its very best. It's funny, it's fun, it's got great continuity, it's got great character beats in it. It plays off of the premise of Voyager well. It's awesome.
It's got exploding shuttlecraft. It's got Voyager crew members locked up in jail. It's got the Queen of Burns. It's got it all.
It's got it. Sunday. You'll be on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this would have been the episode that I would have launched a podcast over. I would have said that this would be a very strong episode not to do, like a reason not to do it because it was so good, whereas Non Sequitur, Favorite Son, some of that other stuff has the easy low-hanging fruit to jump on. But
the reason why, I understand why you're saying that. Like, this isn't an episode that's bad, so what are we going to make fun of, right? That's not the point. It's still like there's so much to talk about that is fun to talk about in it. Yeah, it's fun for us to like kick the show in the balls when it deserves it. And we do a damn fine job of ball kicking, if you ask me. No one did, but I'm just saying if you did. This is Voyager doing it correctly, and it's still fun to just like dissect and talk about and go on a journey as far as like all the implications of this episode and what this means for like what these characters did and that sort of thing. And I fucking love it.
I want to start us off on the writer, which is Kenneth Biller. And Kenneth Biller has had a very checkered history with Star Trek Voyager. He has had some of the absolute low points, including Elogium and Twisted, which Q of the Gray, I mean, he's really responsible for the what's what of Voyager war crimes. But man, his high points, he fucking nails it. And I can't wrap my head around this guy. He's got Unity, he's got the shoot, Tuvix, which I enjoy, Jatral faces. So it's a mixed bag, and sometimes you're going to pull out a scorpion, no pun intended, that's going to stab you in the hand. And sometimes it's just an absolute swish like this. I read let's kind of start backwards here. I read the Memory Alpha on this thing, and there's not a lot really discussed there. And what is on it, I thought was very interesting, that this show is essentially kind of like a writer's room joke, like a Hollywood Inside, like a Birdman, right? Where if you're not really part of the entertainment complex, you're going to miss a lot of the stuff. I think a lot of the jokes that get told in this about finding characters' true motivations and being true and all this other stuff, it's very clearly, now that I've read it, the writer's room talking about itself. But all that went right over my head, and I just saw an awesome use of the holodeck, an engaging use of Voyager's own history, and just some really fun Star Trek dialogue.
You're absolutely right. There's some real tongue-in-cheek fourth wall dialogue too. An inescapable reference to Star Trek and fandom itself. Later on in the episode, like, this episode has fun, yet it has a space conundrum that was just delightful. that
Yeah.
I fucking loved. And everything about it just comes together so perfectly, including how they get out of it, you know? And
Absolutely.
it's an episode that I have been looking forward to start talking about for what is about 19 months. So Peter, where do we start?
We're unfortunately going to start with the Netflix capsule, which yet again completely undermines, I think, any of the surprise fun that could have happened with this episode, because we went in knowing damn well what's going to happen, and it basically takes the entire cold open and just throws it in the trash, because you and I walk into this knowing that it's going to be some sort of holodeck simulation, and I think that ruins what would have been a genuine good surprise, because when we come in, we start with B'Elanna walking through the hallway, right?
That is correct. And she's in her in a gold uniform, but there's subtle hints through the beginning of this episode that tells you something is up. B'Elanna's rank insignia is not correct. She's referred to as ensign at one point. She's working on a random station on the bridge. There's lots of visual cues that are small to begin with that kind of tells you that there's something wrong. Obviously, there's larger ones that come, but she's walking through the hallways and she's approached by Chakotay, who seems really friendly, and then starts asking if she's still getting a hard time from Tuvok, and kind of being real suggestively chummy about why Tuvok sucks.
Yeah, and he drops a few other things throughout this conversation, which when I started off, I'm foolishly sitting there writing in my book like all the inconsistencies, like this is wrong, that's wrong, this doesn't make sense, this hairstyle's off. Because of course we'll later come to find out that this entire scenario was set in very early season 1.
And it's all consistent with early season 1 too, which I thought was really cool.
Right, yeah. So all the stuff I'm about to, sit there and try.
Oh, right, yeah. Everything you're complaining about, you're like, oh fuck, I'm the jabroni. I'm the jabroni now. Oh no.
Yeah. But yeah, Chakotay's leaning in, and he's got a lot of charisma, a amount of charisma that we have never seen out of Chakotay before, and he's being smarmy and suggestive, and starts coaxing her into trying to warm up to the idea of taking the ship away from Janeway. And this is essentially going to become kind of like a big choose your own adventure live action immersion experience here. And we joke about video games throughout this, but that's totally what it is. They hit these fork in the road moments where the player is going to decide how the rest of the simulation is going to unfold. And in this first experience, Janeway shows up on the bridge. She says, well, I'm going to be going off on the shuttle with Tom Paris. The bridges will be yours. The ship's yours. There's a first time for everything. Chakotay seems real warm and nice to the fact that he's going to give it back to her in good condition. Suggests that Tuvok and the stick up his ass should go off and protect her on the mission. But Tuvok seems pretty adamant about staying his post. And off the captain goes to what will become a shuttlecraft accident to happen. Meanwhile,
so Stevie did not know that the premise of the episode, what we set down the
Hey,
watch.
Lucky her.
I know. And so to the point that you were raising about like the little things that are wrong, she started bringing up, like, she started looking at the screen strangely, and I'm like, the fuck does she mean, like, the first time that he's taken over? Like, yeah, she's been in charge a bunch. Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is weird. And she's like,
the best thing about it.
She's her first thing is this like some more time shit? Because this is like she like called it like this feels like this is happening like in the past. And she's obviously I encouraged her to follow that thread and continue to watch. But yeah, she sniffed it out too, of like that line in particular is what clued her in, of like, this is weird. That this is not the first time he's been in charge. This is like the 27th time he's been in charge.
Because unfortunately on this show, you've got one of three things that could be the truth. One, time travel bullshit. Two, a legitimate flashback. I guess 4 things, an alternate reality or something, or the worst culprit, sloppy writing, or a situation where you have something that is filmed legitimately earlier in the production timeline and for whatever reason did not air in its correct order, and now it's just shitty continuity because of bad show running. And when you're in these things where you encounter, it's like, I don't know how to take this. Is this an in-character fuck up, or is this just bad TV? Who knows? You can only find out by watching deeper.
The captain and Tom leave. They go to warp. Couple of heavies to show up on the bridge with a pad. Tuvok is slightly suspicious, but doesn't follow up.
Because, of course, he's a terrible security chief.
Oh, we gonna get to that. And
was one of those guys Smoldering Catcher? Because I kind of vaguely remember the wild-looking ginger.
Yeah, one of them was, in fact, Ayala. He gets name-checked and gets several moments of FaceTime in this episode. I don't know if you've noticed. Mm-hmm. But Smoldering Catcher guy and wild-haired ginger show up. He takes a pad, goes over to the captain's chair, waits to hear that the captain and Tom are at warp, and then gives the call that the time has come, stands up, and phasers Tuvok directly in the chest.
My favorite part of this whole thing is the totally obvious play of his hand where he's like, okay, now that the captain's off the ship, hey, let's turn off all the transporters for that maintenance we've been putting off. Like, wait, what? So I would say it's a pretty good comic build-up to what is very clear about to be a bad time for everybody involved. I like the pacing they use on this. So to give everybody on the bridge a fair chance, like when something this crazy goes down, that's that, I want to say out of character, but that wild, it's hard to act in those moments. So I like that Chakotay keeps the ball rolling fast, kind of steamrolls over some people's questions of what his actions are, and gets right in the meat and potatoes of the episode, which is a badass phaser fight on the bridge. Like you said, his first order of business is to shoot Chakotay right in his bad security chief chest. Harry Kim pops off a couple of shots, but he unfortunately gets brought down by his buddy B'Elanna, his co-haver of space syphilis.
That's correct. The OG pilot episode buddy. And she's obviously like, I will say to Roxanne Dawson's credit in terms of her acting in this opening of the show, she is like kind of bewildered of what's going on around her, right? Like believably, like this is kind of fucking weird, right? And we'll understand in more context, I think very cleverly done by the episode later, but she takes out Harry, and then they begin the going through the ship trying to secure the few people that they weren't able to seal in quarters. She and Chakotay get pinned down behind a hallway by a couple Starfleet mooks doing the standard Star Trek fighting style, which is crouch behind cover and then shoot at each other, and then the second group of people that shoots always hits.
Yeah.
Fucking pattern. It tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. But a third guy pops out and looks ready to wreck their day, but gets blasted in the chest by a compressed phaser rifle. And who is it? Your friend, my friend, and everyone's best friend. It's her. It's the queen. It's Seska.
I would have been so fucking pumped had I not known she was going to be in this thing and just see her coming around the corner. Again, I'm sure Netflix assumes that everybody's going to watch this thing, has seen all these 3 times already, and that there couldn't possibly be a 37-year-old Star Trek fan out there who has never seen one of these once. But man, what a surprise that could have been. She blasts these fools, and she's not the only cool throwback, because again, I want to go back. A lot of stuff is out of place here, and I think my favorite before Seska shows up is Chakotay getting on the comms with Mike Jonas.
Yeah,
you might remember.
We get a quick Mike Jonas name check.
Mm-hmm. Mr. McGill himself, back from the fiery hells of Cat Hell Plasma Fire.
I don't know if it was actually him who did the voice.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
They had someone else do it. I forget what the actor's name was, but it was not the Michael Cera or whatever his name is.
But I appreciate, though, that they made a point of, because we know Jonas was a Maquis. Obviously, he wound up getting thrown into space hell by Snarf. So, he didn't make it out of season 2. But again, this is happening in the past, so all the greatest hits are back. In addition, we see a return of space elf Cass, who's in it very briefly. Like, we basically just see her in the simulation with her season 1 hair, and that's it for like one shot.
2 shots, because she's up in the mess hall, and she also has a point where she gets flushed out of her room, I think, by Seska saying, "Why are you doing this to us?" Again, real disservice to Cass. And for this episode, I'm not going to punch too many dicks here. My only real complaint about this entire episode is that Netflix ruined all the fun. I was really hoping that there would be some mention, some scrap of Lon Suter in all of this.
Oh my God, yes.
There wasn't. And to be fair, because of what this is, it would make sense that the person who made the program would not have known that Lon Suter was anybody who required a second.
Right, but Tuvok's not going to know that Lon Suter's a crazy murderous asshole until season 2, when he's obviously...
Let me ask you this. Do you think if there was a mutinous contingent on the ship at this point, and assuming they all, had made it up to season 3, episode 25 on the timeline, a year past Basics Part 2, do you think that like Q would have to factor into any would-be mutineers' plans? Like, what if the captain's crazy full god boyfriend Q might just so happen to decide that he wants to get involved and like whoosh all your efforts away and like bring her back from the dead, or whatever crazy shit he could do?
It would be a hell of a thing if there was some acknowledgement of the Q in an episode that wasn't a Q episode, but I don't think that ever happens. I don't think
that's what drives me nuts about the Q is, we've talked about this before. There's like Star Trek, and then there's Star Trek with Q. It's like Batman as this dark, brooding comic book, and then sometimes there's Robin, and it completely changes the dynamic of the entire Batman mythos.
I would say even more like crazy, it's Batman in Gotham dealing with Batman villains with the Bat family and all this other stuff, and then there's Batman when he's in the Justice League with Superman and just doing fucking goofy shit and fighting people that should be way outside his fucking league, right? Like way outside the Joker and Two-Face, like Superman level threats. And that's what the Q are. They're just so absurdly super powerful. I guess it's hard for the characters to think about situations, like this without having to be like, well, we really can't do this because there's crazy god beings that want to fuck our captain, so we can just never cross her because they can just show up one day and just turn us into space dust and we're just gone and we're all fucked.
Do you think it's all I would want is just in one episode somewhere, like through the list of things, alien influence, blah, 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 blah. Do you think it could be Q and someone to say no? And protocol on this for Starfleet is that we cannot, it's such a wild variable that it cannot be planned for and should not be accounted for in any problem solving equation because it's just too much of a wild tangent. Do you think it's like the reason why they had to change Tom Paris from Nick Locarno is like, if you mention Q, some previous writer somewhere gets royalties off of it and it creates like financial red tape?
I don't know if it's that, but I think it's more believable that it's, these things are out there, they exist, and there's such a fucking X factor that it's just not logical to consider their involvement in things. Like, if they're involved...
Occam's razor.
Yeah, it's like, if they're involved, then fine. I guess that's what's what, right? Like, they're space gods. They're going to do what they want. We really can't do anything except try and reason with them. Continue on as if they don't exist. And when they do, try and convince them not to, fucking wave their hand and turn you into a sloth or whatever they do.
Speaking of things that don't exist, the defensive position that the Starfleet contingent tries to set up in the mess hall. You've got Neelix's hobo kitchen, which is pretty well fortified, assuming you turn off his hobo trash can fires. But instead of everybody getting back there and really trying to have a fighting chance, they get a bunch of chairs and they put them in a circle like Duck, Duck, Goose. And then they all get inside, and they just kind of huddle in there. Like,
it's the kind of fort you would build if you are in kindergarten and you are attempting to keep the cooties out. Like that's what you would build.
Minus the protective aegis of a blanket over the top of said fort. This is just dudes in the middle of chairs loosely gathered into a circle.
I mean, obviously, if you're in the mess hall and you want a defensive position, you go to the hobo trash can fires, you turn them on full blast, you get out the alpha bioweapon cheese, you break that glass open, and you just unleash the hounds of hell.
That's a scorched earth policy I don't think anybody's willing to commit to at this stage of a mutiny. So, of course, Chakotay, Seska, and Torres roll up in a mess hall, guns out, ready to rock, and they get Starfleet to surrender very quickly. They got everybody at gunpoint, and wouldn't you know it, that slimy space cat, Neelix, flip sides.
I do like the return of cowardly space cat Neelix for this episode, because in season 1, this is what he was. He's like, didn't fucking care about these people. He was a mercenary. It's reflecting Tuvok's bias about Neelix, right?
Absolutely.
As we will learn later, as Tuvok is the author of all of this.
Oh, spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler. Yeah.
To be fair, I nailed this like right off the bat who the mystery guy was. Like, I thought the negative portrayal of Tuvok right out of the gate was like the kind of self-deprecating shit that only Tuvok would be capable of manifesting. I want to also go ahead and point out right now, this is to my knowledge, off the top of my head, the second confirmed Coworker murder simulator that has been authored by Tuvok. The first being his Neelix choke fetish daddy simulator.
Yes, of course.
So yeah, he's got quite the track record of portraying Neelix in a very negative light on the holodeck. I'm sure Troy would have her hands full trying to solve that little HR hiccup, but Neelix jumps ship, says he knows the winning side when he sees one, and off they go.
So they all bring the Starfleet officers and crewmen to one of the cargo bays, and this is where, again, we see strangely charismatic Chakotay giving them a kind of speech saying, listen, we all know what's up. We got stranded here by Janeway, blowing up the array, and now we're fucking going around investigating every anomaly, sticking our nose in every fucking pot. It's bullshit. We're never gonna get home that way, sticking to all this Starfleet principle crap. So we're gonna...
Let me read you the direct quote, because this is, I think, a real strong point of this episode. And I do want to point out, this is not officers. At this point, the Maquis have segregated the crew. All the officers are off in the brig, and what he's doing is talking to like the junior grade crewmen who are more impressionable without...
Yeah, the senior officers are in the brig, the junior officers and crewmen specifically.
So he says, under my command, we won't let almighty Federation principles get in the way of opportunities the way Janeway did when she destroyed the array that could have gotten us home. And we won't be wasting precious time stopping to investigate every insignificant anomaly that we come across. What we will do is use any means to acquire technology that can shorten our journey. To hell with Starfleet regulations. You have 15 minutes to make up your minds. That, word for word, nails so many arguments you and I have levied against this show. Yeah. And I think this is a really excellent moment for the Voyager writers' room to reconcile the stupidity that Janeway and the crew shows and really give the audience a voice about why the fuck do they do these crazy things. I got a side story I meant to bring up here in the beginning. My wife used to be really involved with FARC. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Not news, it's FARC.
I remember FARC.
Some old IRC chat room for FARC, and it got moved on to Discord and whatever. So she's on it, and every now and then she tells me some stuff about what's going on there. Darius made a comment a while ago. It's the boardroom meeting where a guy gets thrown out of the window for having the reasonable suggestion. It's Janeway talking about stopping and investigating every little thing, and the one guy's like, or we could just try and go home in a straight line, and they toss him out the window. Mm-hmm. Someone actually posted that comic in FARC, and my wife's like, oh my God, I know this. I know the guy who made this. My husband has a podcast. It's a joke.
Oh my God, the internet came full circle.
It's happened a couple of times, and I always think that's cool as shit when that happens. Again, props to Darius for his godlike meme generation, but when I see stuff like that in the wild, it's really cool. But that is this speech embodied. And in the end of the day, Voyager needs to be a TV show where people do something that creates an interesting situation that leads to what they hope to be an interesting episode. If you did the reasonable thing, the smart thing, it would be very boring or way too gritty than what they were willing to put out onto a science fiction platform at that time because they had Deep Space Nine. It would have been Babylon 5, essentially. Not Babylon 5. It would have been Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
So when Chakotay's talking here, it's your voice, it's my voice, it's the voice of reason. And more importantly, germane to all of this is Tuvok's voice.
Yes, it is.
As you said, this is Tuvok who made this entire program. And we have had a taste of Real Talk Tuvok when his logic got shut down. And we have seen Real Talk Tuvok in the Skeevian episode when he circumvented Janeway's authority. This isn't just wild bad guy scripting. This is logic and reason, and I think some internalized stank bleeding through.
Well, it's definitely like this speaks to Tuvok's realistic understanding of the situation that they're in. No matter I'm glad you brought up when they visited the Skeevians and he essentially committed small-scale mutiny to try and get the ship home
with Seska.
With Seska, with her help. Tuvok is obviously aware of the argument that they should not be doing these things, and is aware of the compelling nature of that argument because, as Chakotay says at the beginning of the simulation, some of the Federation people are actually in on this. Right? It's not just the Maquis people, and he is putting into Chakotay's mouth an argument that he himself plays out by disobeying the captain, breaking the prime directive, and attempting to cheat their way home. So it makes it if I'm going to give this episode a negative mark for anything, is that it sets this up so beautifully and then does not pay it off. At no point does any character at any time in the quote-unquote real world reflect on this circumstance, which is, I think, is unfortunate because it could have been like the moment that Chakotay and Janeway have to themselves as they talk about it. That's missing in this episode, right? Like Janeway and Chakotay are never seen talking amongst themselves about how this came to be and where their relationship stands now versus the simulation. And there could have been an acknowledgement of like, yeah, we do this shit, and then explain why they do this shit, which you kind of just alluded to.
I will give you all of that, and I had not considered the potential that they had to play with this dialogue further, because what this episode did for me was the show say all of the things that I have said before, and by the end of it, prove to me that I don't want that thing. And this was a bridge that Voyager as a show needed to cross, where you are, as a viewer, buying into the decision to muck around and Federation principles first and stick to the guns and basically conform to what the show wants you to. In my mind, this speech came 3 seasons and 5 episodes too late. This should have been addressed in season 1. And I think it would have let me get past a lot of the frustrations I had earlier on had we got this dialogue out there and moved the viewer into the Janeway camp.
I think that it is a little late. I think that you could have done this in season 2, potentially, because, Seska is off the ship at that point. She's obviously like messing with everyone. She's like an antagonist at that time, so this would have fed into that whole like Seska period of her being the real antagonist.
I think
that would have been the time to show how things had changed and how, to commit everyone to the Starfleet principles. I think it was more in question then, and again, like you're saying, it could have gotten everyone kind of on the Janeway train. But even here, it would have been fine had they actually paid it off. And this was like maybe the only time that it's so perfectly set up for them to do so. And they just kind of don't do it. And that's my only problem with it. And it stuck out to me more on this rewatch because we've had this discussion so many times.
I think I'm getting ahead of myself when I talk about what... There's 2 episodes here. There's a really good what if scandalous holodeck holo novel, right?
Yeah, there's what happens when your coworkers find out that you wrote fan fiction about them. Yes.
And then there's a surprise bitch, I'm back, Seska revenge story. They're both great. I think I would have liked to see them separated. And I think I would have liked to see this episode minus the Seska virus second portion of this have somehow played out and been the end of season 1 instead of fucking space friendship is magic.
I would agree. That could very that could have been better. Instead
of Tuvok running a bunch of Maquis people up and down ladders, I think this would have been the perfect way to bridge season 1 to season 2, bury the Maquis hatchet for good, and get the viewer buy-in that this is going to be a show about Federation principles and exploration instead of a gritty, realistic space drama where people have a get-it-done attitude regardless of cost.
I'm a pretty big defender of the idea behind space friendship is magic. It's just it needed to be Janeway as the main character and not fucking Tuvok. I think I made the point at the time. Like, everything in that episode pays off beautifully if it's the captain herself that is risking her life to save her Maquis malcontents and earns their respect as a group as a consequence. Like, that's all that episode actually needed. This would have certainly been an upgrade beyond that. But where it is now still works. And
sure, it's fun as a time capsule, I suppose. But before, and this again, I'm going to put this little speech by Chakotay. Not only was it delivered well, but more importantly, I think the dialogue was 100% on point. I'm going to put that right up there with Paris convincing the doctor to go back and watch his little daughter die so he could have like
a real human moment. Yeah,
a shared experience with the crew and loss. And the scene really sucks you in about like, oh God, what's going to happen in this room? When suddenly Paris walks in out of nowhere. Paris was supposed to be somewhere else out with the captain. And man, the look on his face as he calls B'Elanna out, he's like, I thought we were supposed to have a lunch date. Clearly he's out of character. He's not a part of this simulation. He's like, I thought we were supposed to have a lunch date. And instead you're in here with fucking Chakotay, your old boss, claiming mutiny over the crew. Like,
I mean, Seska, is right there.
He just caught her looking at like furry like
some awkward shit. And this is when we find out this is a simulation, that B'Elanna found it while doing basically defragging the computer defragging the hard drive on Voyager's computer, ditching some old files, and found this house,
which seems real shaky.
Whatever, it's the perfect excuse. I don't care what the excuse is that they found this thing, but basically on the hard drive of Voyager, Torres found this holo novel and is like, what the fuck is this? And it's this, what appears to be bizarrely, delicately plotted and intricate fan fiction about a Maquis uprising on Voyager. And Tommy Boy Paris, bad boy Tom, he wants a piece of the action and basically cons B'Elanna and resetting it so that he can run it. And this is pretty funny. So my wife likened the run through of what Tom did as B'Elanna did the game the way that she would play it, and then Tom did it the way I would play it, which is to say, after reading the FAQ and just trying to fuck with everything, like trying to find ways to like break the dialogue trees, like that sort of thing. So Tom goes into it knowing what the simulation is and just has this grin on his face of just like, I'm just going to play this like it's Skyrim, and I'm just going to murder everyone in Whitehall and just do goofy shit.
I'm
And
going to try and stop the initial execution from happening when I show up at whatever the capital is of the thief.
right.
This is all gold in my book. And again, if I didn't read that Netflix spoiler and we had gotten up to this point, the mind just starts swimming like, oh God, what if this is an alternate reality? What if this is mirror universe? Who knows? Like, so many different ways this plot could have gone. And then bam, that startling reveal that this is all a holodeck simulation and that B'Elanna's just playing through this thing out of idle curiosity and kind of like this incredulous kind of like shock herself that someone would make this thing. And then, yeah, it totally just turns into video game time. It's a conversation we've all had with our friends like, hey, man, come on, let me play your video game. Isn't it more fun if we, we get to do it our ways? And the certain points when Paris is playing through where not actual, but like in-game Tom Paris is talking and it's him. And it's such a moment where like you've broken a video game and things are characters are interacting with each other that are the same. It's like when blue Chun-Li fights pink Chun-Li in Street Fighter 2. Shouldn't be able to happen, but it's happening. I love that video game parallel, and this is exactly what I would be using the holodeck for.
Yeah, it's Tom's sort of like fucking around attitude with it. I thought was perfect. Like, this is him enjoying the choose your own adventure fan fiction element of just like doing. He starts out by trying to back the plot explicitly and like telling Chakotay he knows all about it, and then he tries to like stop it at the last second and save save Harry and Tuvok, but fails. And then when he gets the option to like join later, he says he will. And we get
you're skipping a very important part here.
Oh, what's that?
He tells Chakotay he's gonna back him, but when the phasers come out, he plays the Tuvok side, and we get the time-honored tradition around these parts where, you guessed it, folks, Tom goes to Space Pokey. I love when they put him in the brig and he gets in the argument with Tuvok because he's standing there, certainly in his element, in a brig of some sorts. But he's talking to Tuvok like, this sucks, man. What are we going to do? We need to have a daring heist. And Hollow Tuvok's like, no, we need to plan and this and that. And he's like, I gotta get back to work. This is boring. This sucks.
Yeah. Why this cutscene's taking fun. Too long? I need a
space bar
dialogue. But I mean, it's a good hint that this is not a novel, but a training simulation, because it's like making you wait and go through like this practice of gauging what your opposition's doing when you're helpless and all this other stuff. Like, I get it. But the idea that Tom's basically trying to find the skip dialogue buttons, like reading the instruction manual, like how the fuck do I get through this cutscene when the next action sequence? I'm already late for my shift. And I can relate. I've played some video games a little too late in my day. Got to work a little late.
What an opportunity for someone to be like, where the fuck is Paris? He's like 40 minutes late for his shift. And then Chakotay walk down there and bust him in what is very clearly like a Reginald Barkley type coworker fantasy inappropriate simulation.
They instead cut to Tom and B'Elanna talking about it in the mess hall, and they very quickly demonstrate that because B'Elanna told the doctor on accident, and then the doctor started telling everybody, that word is out. That there is fan fiction about Voyager, and it's a sweet, like, fucking terrorism simulation, and Chakotay's shooting people, and it's fucking rad as shit, and word is out there, and people are accessing it.
And it's so fun. All of these scenes, there's nothing hammy or cheesy about it because it's totally what happens at a workplace. Everybody talking in hushed tones so the boss doesn't hear. These little gossip circles with something scandalous just getting passed around like the most valuable commodity. And I love it. And this is a great expression of a Star Trek crew family functioning the way a family does, a workplace family does. And I think it's what's really been sorely missing. And I don't know if it's kind of the humor element or the human relatable element, but this is what really, I think, drew me into the episode.
you're right in that it's very realistic in how everyone knows this is bad, but they're like, they can't fucking help themselves. This is so neat. Like, someone did this. Someone wrote this. Someone took time. I want to know what I do in this simulation. Like, what's my role? Am I a dirty terrorist? Am I some sucker that gets captured? Do I join after I'm brought to the cargo bay? Like, it's a hell of an experience having people write fiction about you. You and I have had some experience with this.
With what, your XCOM playthroughs?
More like through Vampire LARP.
Don't say that word, Joe.
Well, I mean, Peter, you did have people write fan fiction about your character.
Yeah, that's kind of a gross feeling.
Well, I mean, think about that. Think about that gross feeling for a second.
Oh, absolutely.
All of these people are experiencing it kind of in real life in an interactive format that they can immerse themselves in.
I remember when I found out that one of my friends back in high school, her little sister, who was still in junior high, and mind you, this is like 1997, 1998. I was like 98. And I found out that her little sister had taken the yearbook picture that I had scanned and given to my friend, and she was going on AOL chat rooms and like getting into like cyber sex masquerading as me.
Oh Jesus!
And that was
Jesus,
real fucking gross, real gross feeling. I can only assume that a mutiny scandal holodeck fan fiction that involves you taking the wrong side or doing something unheroic would be maybe, I don't know, worse, almost as bad. I don't know where that ranks as far as like AOL cybersex chat rooms, but it's not a good place to be.
I have no jokes. That's just fucking up. That's fucked up. Okay. All right. Yeah. Move on. We're moving on. We're moving on by Paris deciding he wants to basically reload his save and go back through the scenario as a full-fledged devoted member of Chakotay's mutineers team.
Mm-hmm. And he's doing his evil playthrough.
Right?
That's what I do. You do your good playthrough, and then you do your evil playthrough.
So he's doing his evil playthrough, and he gets to the point where it looks like Janeway has come back with Tom. They're going to start trying to take the ship back. They confront the Maquis, who have all decided to put on some like real weird 24th century like pajamas.
They're terrible. We've been doing so. That's a great callback to season 1. Season 1 and season 2, terrible civilian clothes. Season 3, awesome civilian clothes.
Is that what they wore in the fucking pilot? Because I don't remember, and I didn't look it up. But that might
These look like Pac-Led clothing.
Yeah.
This looks like the same shit the Pac-Leds wear. And it made me think too. It's like, all right, if the Maquis really did have an uprising, do they ditch their Starfleet uniforms, or do you just say, fuck it, we're gonna try and keep this thing somewhat militant? I guess you would have to get rid of the uniforms, right? You're bucking the authority, you're throwing the Federation ideals and Starfleet to the side. You'd have to burn the uniforms.
I mean, I get the not uniforms. I'm just wondering if these are actually like reuses of the Maquis stuff. I don't think it is, because Ayala is not. Yeah, Ayala is not in smoldering catcher gear, so like it's not, I think, 100% converted. But in any case, they're going through this part of the scenario where Janeway's making her epic attempt to take the ship back, and then Tom experiences the greatest horror of any gamer, and that is that he's reached the end of the content and he needs to find DLC. It just ends in the middle of a showdown with himself, and he finds out that this is where the story ends. Like, someone did not program past this point, so there's no more narrative, so the program's over. It's literally just a half-finished holo novel.
Yeah, when you fight the end boss, you don't get to walk around the world map anymore completing side quests. It's just game over. You got to start fresh. It's a real 90s move, man.
Well, it's not even like the end boss. Like, you didn't even get to fight the end boss. It's It's like in the second to last level before you get to the end boss. It's just like, and it's over now. So they cut to a senior staff meeting where there's fast forward to the end, and Janeway's like, and so now that we're done with actual shipboard issues and real work, let's talk about how everyone is accessing the simulator where your coworkers are murdering each other. She's real casual about it, of like, I understand some people have accessed this. Like, a third of the ship has accessed it like 67 times over the last 3 days. Apparently, some people are getting some real fucking reps. Murdering your coworkers, taking over the ship, committing felonies.
What I thought was interesting in the simulator, and they go to kind of great lengths to acknowledge, is that nobody has actually died in the simulation. Everybody's been stunned, and Holo Chakotay's goal was to take all of the people that wouldn't join the Maquis and strand them on a planet a la Basics.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's like, we're kind of interesting. What's going on here, guys? And there's like some sheepish looks around the table, and then pretty much everybody puts their hand up. And then, yeah, Tom's like, well, we're talking about this. Who made this thing? Because I want more. And before they can really launch a whole diatribe about, who could have been behind it, Tuvok just puts his hands up and says, I did it. I'm embarrassed I did it. I meant to delete it. I didn't know there's going to be a backup file. And yeah, my bad.
The nature of the program being a simulation, Tuvok explains, like, at first, this was a realistic scenario. At first, it was reasonable to think that things weren't going to work out with the random terrorists we picked up and the Federation leftovers that led them, and that they might decide to do things their own way. But it became clear as time went on, after I had a great, like, friendship is magic time with Dolby after Chakotay punched him and all this other stuff happened, that it wasn't going to happen, so I stopped working on it. And that's true through the timeline of the show, but again, this is kind of where the show could have reflected on that for a moment in a meaningful way. And it just decides not to, where the captain basically says, yeah, so someone's got to finish this story because, we're stuck out here in the Delta Quadrant. We have a finite amount of, like, fucking shit that we can do. And we need to start coming up with our own sort of programs and fun to have. Like, we only have so many pre-programmed sex dolls and Dixon Hill stories. And
I like that shout out too, because they're like, we could make it like something or a detective novel. And it's such an obvious shout out to Dixon Hill. And everybody just kind of rolled their eyes at this suggestion.
But, Janeway's on board of, like, saying, hey, someone finished the coworker murder simulator.
How do you feel about that?
I'm not okay with it. I don't think realistically, without some further explanation, I can understand why Janeway would just be like, oh, this is harmless. This is fine. This won't suborn insubordination or bad feelings amongst the crew. And
tap into some real ill will that should be festering under the surface. And we've talked about it before. I mean, they've slapped a Band-Aid on a few times, but Lon did murder Starfleet, and Starfleet worked hard to get where they are. Like, I love this episode, and for the purpose of the episode, I like her just kind of having this counterintuitive attitude, but everything Tuvok says about why this thing needs to die in a fire is kind of 100% like nail on the head.
Yeah, he's 100% right, and Janeway offers no legitimate defense of why she thinks it should be finished. And later on in the series, there's going to be a similar situation as to this that demonstrates incredible hypocrisy on everyone's part because of their lack of giving a shit about this. Since I know that, it's even worse to me because I know that that's what happens in the future. But like you, the rest of this episode is so awesome. I don't care. I don't care about this weak defense. It doesn't matter to me.
I would be really worried if I was a member of the crew and I found out that the boss knows that I'm taking part in Coworker Murder Simulator 2373. Because I would be like, is this now a weird psych test where the
Yeah,
promotional
how many of you
material...
decided to back the mutineers?
I guess you're probably
how
all
many did
wondering
that?
why I've summoned you all here to this very large cargo bay. You are the group that has all ran the murder simulation as pro-rebellion and murdered your co-workers. You have been designated criminals under the Thought Police Act, and you will now be sequestered to quarters a la Lon Suitor because damn dog, inappropriate.
I don't know how crazy big brother the Federation is supposed to be, but that actually seems pretty reasonable. Like, I'm going to go ahead and access how many people decided to engage in fantasy, insubordination, mutiny, and murder, because that seems relevant to me as the captain.
All your playthroughs are now being saved for the captain's private viewing.
But none of that happens, and instead Tom volunteers to finish the story because he has aspirations for writing. But of course, Tom's a hack. We already know Tom's a hack, right? Because the only thing he's programmed on the holodeck has been a makeout simulator, right, for the Doctor to use with Dr. Pell on Mars in a Cadillac, and Sandrine's, his nasty, filthy French fuck bar, where literally all of his sex toys run around and rub their hands on things. So they cut to the mess hall, and Tuvok is like trying to basically integrate himself back into doing the changes to the program, because he still has an attachment to doing it right, because he's got that sense of Vulcan pride and authorship, which I get. And his ideas are like, yeah, how about Janeway takes back over and just murders all of the people that opposed her? And it's like, dude, is this fucking guy right for the 8th season of Game of Thrones? Jesus, that's some fucking hack fraud shit if I ever heard it.
I love Tuvok as a creative entity. And we often talk about what is the right way to present Tuvok, who is face value a very boring character in the show, and how do you find moments to make him interesting without it always being him off of his rails and acting out of character. I think him as a creator, as an author, is a good expression of something that is within his capabilities realistically, but there's enough meat on the bone to keep it interesting. And I think that Tim Russ and Robert Duncan McNeil here get some of the best comedy parts that we've seen in all 3 seasons of Voyager, because you got obviously Tuvok playing the straight man, you got Tom acting wild, and it works. And I get now, having read Memory Alpha, that this is all, again, the writer's room talking to itself, maybe mocking fan fiction, whatever. It's Hollywood rubbing its own tummy. But at face value, which is how I took it the first time, it's just 2 characters acting well within their acceptable scope, and just good, fun Star Trek coming out of it.
Yeah, them playing off as a duo is solid. I completely agree with that assessment. And in the scene when they start getting like suggestions about what to do with the fan fiction, is great for fourth wall breaking humor. Like there's this dialogue where Tom essentially mocks everyone taking seriously fiction and choices that fictional characters make within fiction as something that they should take with such gravity. The most self-referential thing that he could possibly do, because that's what we're doing right now on the internet for an hour a week. I feel judged, but appropriately judged. Yeah, at least this episode's already an hour. It's going to go longer. And then B'Elanna's like, there should be a steamy romance scene, and it's like tries to fit that in, and the Doctor tries to fit his here's all the revisions about things my character should do, and Neelix is like, I think you got me completely wrong.
Neelix says, no offense, Mr. Vulcan, but I don't think you understand my character very well. You know where I'm going, folks. You know what I'm going to say, and it's that Tuvok should have looked him right in the eye and said, I know exactly who you are. We were the same person for 3 months. Chill
However,
out, Neelix.
this was before that happened. So there would
Yeah,
be
but it's after. Now he knows. Like, yeah, okay, Neelix. I know. Yes, thank you, Neelix. I know you inside and out. Just fucking chill out. I'll do you justice.
in the end, after playing some of this comedy back and forth, Tuvok and Paris wind up back at the holodeck, and Paris has to submit to Tuvok being involved in doing the rewrites because only Tuvok can access the file. So they go ahead to open the narrative parameters file for the program, which is basically the edit mode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we find the trap sprung. And things kind of shimmer and go wild. Systems start failing on the ship. The transporters go out. The controls to the holodecks go out.
This is in the real ship, too. This isn't the holodeck ship.
Yeah, the real ship, shit starts going wrong. And then, in the most meta of prisons, we find Tuvok and Paris in a space pokey in a holodeck that is also a space pokey. So,
double jail.
Boys are in double prison. And they are confronted by Seska. And Seska's like, hey, what's up, Tuvok? So, if you're seeing this, you must have accessed the edit file for your stupid ass little simulation program about the Maquis taking over the ship. Well, guess what? I fucking found it. And I don't like it. I don't like that you betrayed all of the Maquis. And I'm gonna punish you now. So this is hilarious on a number of different levels. Just absolutely hysterical. First, I have to appreciate that this means that Seska pre-programmed running hot game all over Tuvok, as she always did, before she even first ran hot game over Tuvok. So this was done a month before she turned traitor, we'll find out. So a month before she begins her reign of terror, where she outclasses Tuvok at every step, she pre-programmed outclassing Tuvok at every step.
So Seska's CCG, the Decipher collectible card game card, basically says if this character is at any location with Tuvok, pick Tuvok up and throw his card in the trash.
Throw it in the garbage.
Seska like 15, Tuvok 0. Tuvok's like -6. I love it.
I absolutely adore that. And then 2, so this is before Seska got found out as a traitor, but it's clearly after she started betraying the ship, because as we know, she was giving technological information to the Kazon, and eventually she gets caught having done that. So I think it's reasonable to assume that in that period that she has found that she has already started betraying everybody, and so she is clearly at some point going to finish that betrayal, right? And she has set this trap for Tuvok, knowing that eventually either she's going to get found out and is going to have to do something, or her plans to get Chakotay to like take the ship over are going to fail, and this is just going to be a little gift.
This seems real sloppy for her. Seska was a very great villain with very logical and reasonable steps of being evil and treacherous. This seems like a real big liability to have laying around on the off chance that before she's ready to set her plans in motion, Tuvok might have circled back around to fix this thing and could have fucked everybody and totally outed her as bad guy. I am not willing to closely examine the timelines here or play it all in the space of, is this stupid? Like, this episode's so good. This is one of the very few times I'm just going to sit back and let it happen. I want to point out this.
I'm willing to accept the big brain move that this was like Seska essentially covering her bases of like, well, I'm already got these things in motion, so I'm kind of fucked here in terms of like staying undercover. Either my move with the Kazar are going to work or my move with Chakotay is going to work, one of the two, but I'm not on Team Federation anymore, so I might as well start laying some groundwork to fuck over the people I don't like.
Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I'm again, willing just to slay back and take it for what it is, and it's Seska back in my face.
And
This is deep in the episode too. This was a surprising part to me, was how much time the episode had covered, like how much content had put out there, how much fun I'd had with the episode before arguably the real plot even starts here. And that's why I'm saying I think you had two really solid episodes. You had the fun coworker scandal simulator, and then Seska's revenge computer virus. And I think they're both really viable stories. And it's a shame that the episode prior to this was boring ass super transporter, where it could have been a full episode dedicated to either of these great topics.
So the rest of this episode is essentially the simulation turning into a slow torture and murder porn simulator. So what Seska has done is turned the holodeck into basically a bomb in the ship and fucked everything up that could possibly intervene. The transporters don't work. All the controls to get into the holodeck don't work. And it's booby trapped so that if they try and like cut power, it'll just explode and kill everybody that's there. And on the holodeck itself, it's programmed with the safeties off and it's correcting itself whenever anything happens in terms of within the story to make sure that eventually Tuvok and anybody else that got captured in there gets tortured by what's happening and then gets murdered at the end. It's beautiful. And it starts with them like encountering the captain, the programmed part of the captain, and then gets confronted by Seska and Chakotay and accidentally killing herself when she gets vaporized by a phaser malfunction. And it's clear that Seska essentially programmed this as her fan fiction, which is the third best part. This isn't just her having revenge, it's her engaging in the fan fiction trope. She is playing out that she is just smarter than everybody else, that she is, outthought everyone, and that Chakotay's making out with her, and she is completely in charge, manipulating everyone exactly the way she wants to. And I'm like,
which, to be fair, is pretty much real life.
It is, but it's perfect. It's the final payoff of the fact that even the villain couldn't help herself but to program this as fan fiction for her desires. And so the simulation version of herself is making out with this random Chakotay simulation while the captain gets vaporized by her own phaser. It's fucking awesome.
It's all good. My favorite part in this is where she starts telling them, you guys got to run and play by my rules. And Paris is like, well, fuck you. And she's like, yeah, no, fuck you. And hits him with the phaser, demonstrating that the safeties are in fact off. And Tuvok and Paris run off to sickbay. EMH pops on and is like, oh, here, let me help you. And he's like, oh, yeah, my elbow. And he's like, 20 cc's nitric acid, a little proverbial salt in the wound. And Tom's like, rogue AI. And Tuvok tries to get in the way. And while EMH has one-handed hypo spray, like injecting Tom with poison, he's got Tuvok in a chokehold in the other hand, just pinning him down to the bio bed until he's done torturing Tom. And then he takes both of them and like just fucking tosses them out in the hall and says, come on back anytime. You hear?
They continue through. They come up with the line of how they're going to get out of this to say, we just need to delay our deaths as long as possible to give our shipmates the opportunity to somehow help us, right? To fix whatever it is that she's done that's cut off communications, cut off transporters and whatever, and keeping us fucking trapped here. So they get into the Jeffries tubes. And meanwhile, obviously on the real ship, they figured out all this stuff. They figure out like, oh, no shit, Seska actually did fuck with this. Like she figured this out like a month before she left and she fucking booby trapped this shit. This is all her. And they come to the conclusion, the only thing that they can do right now as Harry tries to speed through a fix on the transporters is to subtly reprogram the simulation to try and prevent Tom and Tuvok from dying. So they get like into the Jeffries tubes and suddenly there's a plasma fire. So Janeway programs in a plasma fire extinguisher. And that's when they like kind of start to get wise to this, what's going on. And then she plants a little message and an iPad saying, hey, go to the weapons locker. Like trying to plant these seeds. And they don't leave themselves enough time to do much with it because it's like the end of the episode. And essentially, they get caught. And the explanation is like, this tactic isn't really going to work because Seska has so thoroughly fucked the system that anything they're doing on the exterior to mess with what's going on is going to be immediately rewritten by Seska's program. And they eventually get led into the cargo bay for essentially final execution.
Mm-hmm. I liked when they start hacking Chakotay and having him become a good guy and arguing with Seska until finally Seska just guns him down too. And it seems like all the cards have been played. And Janeway kind of widens the scope of the game and says, we can't really control anything in Voyager at this point. Now what do we do? And they start having aliens attack the ship, right? Like just drawing the game out of its original scope. I wish they would have used someone fun. They used some, what I believe to be no-name aliens that we had never really heard of before. I thought it would have been cool if they would have had Vidians or, some other season 1 baddies attacking. But no, they use these other guys. And finally, I think in the chaos, Tuvok had taken one of the phaser rifles. She takes it from him and she goes to finally execute them. And she gets a little taste of her own medicine as the weapon backfires and Seska hologram vaporizes herself, thus ending the simulation.
In the end, this is what I thought was clever. In the end, in the final confrontation that Tuvok is going to have with Seska, he actually outsmarts her. It's, probably the smallest little check mark that you can put in this category. But at last, and I think for the only time that we will ever see, the chief of security finally outsmarts Seska and kills her with her own trick. Programs the phaser rifle to blow up in her face, knowing that that's what she's going to do with it.
I'm not giving him any checks, man. That program should have been aware of the phaser rifle settings and whatever. This is where we get ramrodded. The unbelievable conclusion that Tuvok could have anyway outsmarted Seska. Immersion broken.
That's immersion's broken. Like you can't handle it, huh?
Yeah. This is, you know what? You might as well just had Howard the Duck walk on stage at this point. This is just complete nonsense. This is garbage.
So there's a little denouement after this. They're all kind of like sitting in the mess hall, and have that standard, what a wacky situation we got into. So there isn't really much like payoff at the end of this, and it just kind of ends with this. But it doesn't matter. The episode is just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, this is, I think this might be my favorite episode of Voyager yet, man. This might have beat out Eye of the Needle. This might have beat out any of them. This is that real sweet spot of cool, thoughtful sci-fi. And what a cheap episode for them to run, too. Like, you're not using... This is a total ship in a bottle. This is basically just your normal crew minus Martha Hackett, who got to come back. It's a low-budget story, yet it's such a big story that for being a ship-based episode, I think it really just blew up awesome. And it's very clearly a Seska, we're sorry tribute episode. Sorry we took your fucking sweet-ass character and let Jerry Taylor throw her in the trash. Please come on back. Let's tell another fun story because you were a great character. I'd like to think that there was some sort of fan interaction in making this happen and putting, some a whisper in the writer's ear that this was a good character and they goofed by getting rid of her. I loved it. I love this thing top to bottom. It spoke to my interests. It was great acting. It was Star Trek fun, good action, good adventure, good thought. A+.
I think that this is Voyager at its finest, just kind of letting its hair down a little bit, having fun with its own premise, I think that it's both got good continuity, good self-referential humor. It uses the holodeck in a novel way. It pays off an idea of like Star Trek and in its fictional like technological framework that like something fans have always like kind of like thought about, like the idea of like simulations about real people and your coworkers, and would that be weird, like all that sort of thing, the sort of thing that fans like to talk about and think about. And this is an episode about that, and that's what makes it just kind of like just like fun to watch. And I have some small quibbles because I think that it could have just a little bit been just serious enough to be an episode where we have a confirmation of why it is the Federation way is the best way. It's something they always kind of punt on, and they punt on it again here, but it doesn't stop it from being excellent. And I enjoyed watching it again.
All right, man. Let's see where we're going from here. This is it. This is Jerry Ryan, man. We are moving into Season 3, Episode 26, Scorpion Part 1. We have Santa Claus with a breadbasket. I don't know, maybe that's Galileo or Leonardo da Vinci. I can't tell. You got Janeway. About to enter Borg space, the Voyager crew discovers a threat so devastating that even the Borg cannot deal with it. Is it another Q Civil War?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, like, bringing the Borg into this was inevitable. But what they do here is just, you make your best villain and you just kick him right in the balls. And you'll have to see it to believe it. But, remember that fever dream you had where you woke up and you saw horrible CGI?
Yeah.
It's time.
No. Give me more Martha Hackett. About to enter Borg space.
Take me back, Martha.
The Voyager
Martha, can I go back to wherever you are?
Well, hold on. Let me read this again. Let me read
Yeah.
this again. About to enter Borg space, the Voyager crew discovers a threat so devastating that even the Borg cannot deal with it. Well, obviously they're talking about Seska, right? The Seska computer virus has moved out of the Voyager holodeck into the Borg collective, and Seska's going to end up as the new Borg queen, right? That's how this goes, right, Joe?
Yeah.
If only.
If only. So, we'll cover this next week. So the episode we're recording now is going to come out, I think, July 5th. A little delayed. Sorry about that. I had an ear infection. It's on me.
Yeah, you're a day late, but you're going to get a whole extra 45 minutes of programming.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot.
Could do a two-parter on this.
The episode on Scorpion should come out on July 11th. And so that means we're due to do a season 3 rip after that. So plan on the week of July 14th. We'll announce a date exact depending on our schedule. We will do a live stream season 3 rest in peace for our content that week, and then we'll repost it on Thursday as a download for audio for you folks that follow on the podcast streams. Of course, if you can attend and be part of it, we love it. We love people coming in, talking, interacting, giving us questions. We actually got a really cool, I think, a deep dive question that we intend to tackle on our Voyager Please Trauma support group. And so we'll be kind of mining that as well for folks that have things that they have pondered and questioned as we've gone through season 3. So Jenny Z, we thank you for that content, and we look forward to talking about it. And let us know if you've got anything that you want us to talk about. You can always just email us at VoyagerPlease@gmail.com. You can tweet us at VoyagerPlease. And of course, we've got all of our Facebook stuff as well. So similarly, we can be found at VoyagerPlease there. Just type that in. All right. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next week. Peace.